Welcome to your daily dose of sci-fi adventures. New stories dropped every single day. Smash that subscribe button and ring the to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and unlock even more epic cosmic tales. The city of Novaris Prime was built atop the bones of 1,000 worlds. Its skyline a jagged silhouette of spires and antennae that pierced the perpetually overcast sky. Neon veins of light traced across monorails and skybridges, illuminating the perpetual twilight of its lowest tiers. In these lower depths known as the Shale District, rainwater pooled into metallic basins, poisoned by the refinery outflows and acid rains that swept in from the upper atmosphere. It was here, among the shuddering hum of fusion turbines and the clatter of scrap dealers, that a small human boy named Kai eked out a living. Kai was 12, but his eyes carried the weary wisdom of someone twice his age. His dark hair clung to his forehead in damp tendrils, and his faded jumpsuit had once borne the insignia of the Novacorp Industrial Works, now tattered at the elbows and smeared with grease. He moved with cat-like agility, nimbly navigating piles of junk and half-buried machinery that littered the alleyways. In one hand he clutched a battered holo emitter, its projector flickering uncertainly, and in the other he held a handful of scavenged circuit cores, tinged with just enough residual charge to buy a crust of synth bread for his ailing grandmother. Every evening, he made the same pilgrimage through the dim-lit corridors beneath the city's grand bazaar, where merchants hawked glowing crystals from the other mines, fox dragon hide jackets, and the latest gray market tech. With each measured step, Kai's mind wandered to dreamscapes far removed from rust and filth, visions of ancient, winged leviathans soaring above crystalline oceans, of scales that gleamed like galaxies caught in the light of twin suns. In the holo-sagas he devoured, whenever he could afford to rent them, dragons had once been the rightful lords of the skies, their roars shaking planets from orbit and their firestorms forging new continents. But those days belonged to myth and legend until tonight, a sudden gust of wind twisted around him, carrying the bitter tang of ozone and the distant crackle of lightning. The monorail above let out a tortured screech as it rounded the curve, sparks raining down like fiery raindrops. Instinctively, Kai ducked beneath an overhanging girder, narrowly avoiding a torrent of flaming embers. The world seemed to pulse for a heartbeat as the city's power grid hiccuped, plunging the alley into deeper shadow before emergency lighting bathed the walls in sickly green. As the hum of the monorail faded, Kai noticed something new in the gloom, a faint, oscillating glow emanating from the base of a collapsed service conduit. Intrigued, he pushed aside a length of twisted piping and uncovered a small alcove walled in iridescent moss that seemed to shimmer with its own internal light. There, cradled in the bioluminescent growth, lay an egg the size of a child's head, a perfect ovoid of mother of pearl. Kai's breath caught, his holo emitter stuttered in his grasp, flickering to a pale blue as he raised it. The light from the device danced across the egg's surface, revealing swirling patterns that resembled nebular clouds. Every few seconds, the shell pulsed a gentle throb, like the heartbeat of a sleeping beast. It was impossible, he thought. Dragons were extinct, their eggs destroyed or sealed away when the Great Purge had ended the Dragon Age a millennium earlier. Caution warred with desperation in Kai's chest. He thought of his grandmother, her labored breathing at night, the fear in her glazed eyes when the coughing fits racked her frail bones, the medtech credits he'd hoped to buy with. Those circuit cores were nowhere near enough. But this was beyond anything he could sell at the bazaar. Not even the secretive vault minders of the outer spire would dare deal in a genuine dragon egg. His fingers trembled as he reached forward. The moss around the egg felt cool and damp, releasing a sweet, spiced scent that made his head swim. As he lifted it, the egg's vibration increased, humming through the pads of his palm. It was alive, warm, and demanding his attention. For a moment, Kai felt a strange kinship, as though the creature within recognized his touch. A distant roar fractured the night air, a sound like rolling thunder, combined with a high-pitched keening that rattled the gates of his skull. Kai froze. His heart thundered. He turned toward the source, far across the lower sky. A great shape moved through the cloud layer, leaving a trail of fire and wind in its wake. The shape was indistinct, too far away to make out details, but the roar was unmistakable. It belonged to a dragon. Memories flooded back of the holosagas, of the imperial decrees that had branded dragons as threats to galactic stability, and of the Queen of Flames whose edicts had ended the age of dragonkind. Those stories had always seemed like fantasy. Now the truth bore down on him. This impossible, iridescent egg had come from one of the last known dragons in the galaxy. The hatchling's ancestors had been bound by oaths to the All-Fire Empire, serving as living starships and guardians of ley line conduits that powered interplanetary gates. But the dragon's power had become a threat to the Empire's centralized authority, and so the purge had been declared. Every dragon egg was to be confiscated, and any hatchling seen as a weapon was to be destroyed. Those few eggs that survived had been hidden, smuggled off-world by sympathizers, or lost in the chaos of rebellion. Kai pressed the egg to his chest, the glow pressing against his ribcage like a second heart. If he turned it into the authorities or to any of the myriad gangs that patrolled the Shale District, he would never live to spend what he earned. Worse, the Dragon Queen herself might come hunting. The ramifications were unimaginable. Yet, he could not simply leave it here to rot. With a quiet resolve, Kai slipped the egg into the satchel at his side, pulling in the moss like a protective cocoon around it. He checked the alley's entrance. The lights in the arcologies above still flickered, but no patrol droids or scavenger gangs had yet noticed his prize. He let out a slow breath and ducked forward, silent as a shadow. It was only when he stepped into the relative safety of an abandoned maintenance tunnel that Kai allowed himself to tremble. He sank to the cold floor, chest heaving, and placed the satchel beside him. Gently, he unfastened the flap and cradled the egg between his palms. "The hell are you?" he whispered, voice cracking. "Don't worry, I won't hurt you." For a long moment, nothing happened. The egg was smooth and silent, save for that faint pulsing. Kai's mind raced. Should he run? Find the Starfire Guild, the rumored resistance network whose motto was "Dragons deserve to live"? Or should he find a wealthy collector who'd pay enough to buy a cure for his grandmother, even if it meant condemning the hatchling to a life of confinement? A drop of water, dislodged from the tunnel's ceiling, plinked onto the egg's surface, tracing a glowing rivulet down the shell. Kai watched it glide across the shifting patterns and fall into the gelatinous moss below. The egg seemed to shudder, a tiny quake that vibrated through Kai's fingers. Kai set the egg down on a pile of old cargo crates, then rummaged through his pack for the only warmth source he carried, a small, low-output heating coil salvaged from a broken biotech incubator. He nestled it under a bed of torn cloth and moss, arranging the egg on top. The coil stirred to life with a soft hiss, casting an orange glow that mingled with the egg's pearlescent shimmer dot as the coil hummed. Kai's thoughts drifted to his grandmother. He could almost feel her frail hand in his own, her voice rasping prayers for him to be safe. He owed her everything he possessed, every scrap of hope he held onto. He owed to her sacrifice. Tonight, he had a chance to ease her suffering, but he also carried something far greater than credits or cures. Something that could change the balance of power between empires. Something whose very existence was a crime. Lightning flickered through a grated vent above, casting dancing shadows across the egg's surface. Kai watched, entranced, as colors shifted in the shell blues burning to golds, emeralds melting into dusky violets. He felt a chill of anticipation. In the silent anticipation of the tunnel, Kai realized that his life had irrevocably changed. He could not walk away. He was bound to this creature, this egg, with a bond stronger than any contract or imperial decree. Summoning every ounce of courage, he stood and brushed dirt from his knees. He turned and strode out of the tunnel. The weight of the impossible prize secure at his side. The night wind carried distant echoes, a royal draconic roar, the hum of flying vehicles, the murmur of a world unaware that a new chapter in Dragonkind's history had begun. And somewhere, high above the shimmering towers of Novaris Prime, the Dragon Queen had sensed the disturbance, a mother's call rebounding across the cold void, guiding her wrath toward the one human child who dared to cradle her legacy in trembling hands. Kai did not sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the egg's iridescent shell quivering in the low orange glow of the heating coil, as though it pulsed with its own heartbeat. He lay on a tattered blanket beside his makeshift incubator, clutching the folds of the cloth like a lifeline. Beyond the thin wall of the maintenance shaft, the city thrummed with distant sirens and the steady hum of fusion turbines, a lullaby of industry that offered little comfort to a boy who had just stolen the last living vestige of a bygone age. As the minutes ticked by, the temperature in the tunnel rose. Kai watched the readout on a battered thermo gauge he'd scavenged earlier. 24, 28, 32 degrees Celsius. The moss bed around the egg steamed faintly in the heat, its bioluminescent veins glowing brighter in response. Kai leaned forward, brushing a loose strand of hair away from his eyes. "Come on," he whispered. "It's going to be okay." He tried to distract himself with practical tasks. First, he scrambled back to his pack and retrieved the small vial of nutrient gel he'd traded for that morning, a thick, pale substance engineered for biotech prototypes. It was hardly enough to sustain a newborn dragon, but it would have to do. Gingerly, he pried open the egg's shell with a length of scrap titanium wire. The shell cracked under his careful pressure, cleaving in half to reveal a slick, membrane-lined interior. A soft hiss escaped the egg as warm air met cool. Kai's heart leaped. Within the shell's cavity, he could make out the glimmering curve of a tiny wing, folded like origami against the creature's side. For a moment, the hatchling remained motionless. Then, with a sound like steam escaping from a pressure valve, the membrane ruptured, and the creature burst forth. Kai stumbled back, awed. In his lap lay a dragon no bigger than his forearm, its scales still mottled with bits of shell and moss. Its head was oversized for its body, eyes closed tight against the world, and its snout opened in a gurgling chirp. Thin wisps of smoke drifted from its nostrils, curling into the orange haze of the tunnel. She's alive," Kai murmured. His voice cracked with wonder and relief. "Welcome to the world, little one." Carefully, he lifted the hatchling and placed it on a nest of cloth. He dabbed the nutrient gel onto his fingertip and held it to the dragon's snout. At first, the hatchling recoiled, emitting a high-pitched trill of uncertainty. But Kai was patient. He coaxed gently, humming a lullaby he remembered from his grandmother's childhood stories. Gradually, the dragon sniffed, then licked the gel with a tentative tongue that felt like warm silk against his skin. A low rumble resonated through the hatchling's throat, a purr or an engine idling to life, and Kai felt the vibration in his bones. She ravenously consumed the gel, her eyelids fluttering with each swallow. When she was done, she collapsed in a heap, scales iridescent with fatigue. Kai let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He switched off the heating coil, careful not to startle her, and draped another blanket over them both. As the ambient temperature of the tunnel settled, the hatchling's breathing synchronized with his own, slow, rhythmic, and alive. Dawn's feeble light filtered through a grated vent high above, casting lines of silver across the tunnel floor. Kai awoke to the gentle weight of the hatchling curled against his side. Her scales, once dull and mottled, now shimmered like polished metal in the rays of light. Her body had grown perceptibly overnight. Kai estimated she was nearly a quarter larger than when she first emerged. He slipped from beneath her to preserve what little warmth he could, then crept to the edge of the tunnel to peer out. The shale district lay quiet beneath the smog-tinged sky, the monorail tracks cold and silent. No patrol droids or bounty hunters were in sight, but Kai knew he could not linger. He had to find a safer refuge before the Queen's heralds scoured the lower levels. Back in the tunnel, he propped the hatchling against a stack of crates and began the delicate task of cleaning her. He mixed purified water with a drop of antiseptic salvaged from medical waste, then used a scrap of soft cloth to wipe away traces of moss and shell fragments. The hatchling tolerated his ministrations, gazing at him with immense, golden-flecked eyes that seemed to drink in every detail of his face. "How did you end up here?" Kai whispered, tracing the ridges along her snout. "Who would abandon you in the darkness?" He felt a pang of guilt. If he hadn't found her, she might have frozen or worse, been discovered by Imperial enforcers. Once she was clean, Kai fashioned a makeshift harness from a length of braided wiring and a strip of rubber he found among the debris, wrapping it gently around her torso and forelimbs. He fashioned a sling that he could wear at his side. It felt like binding sunlight itself, but he knew she needed protection, and he needed to keep her close. He packed his few remaining supplies into his satchel, the holo emitter, a handful of charge cores, the nutrient gel, and a small reserve of water. Then, he scooped the hatchling into her sling and slung her over his shoulder. She clung to him tentatively, wings tucked tight but tail swaying in curiosity. Kai emerged from the tunnel into the pale light of morning. The bazaar stalls were awakening. Vendors unrolled tarps emblazoned with synthetic fabrics. Street urchins offered to carry packages, and the smell of nutrient broth and roasted insect skewers filled the air. Kai breathed deeply. He would need to blend in as he made his way to the Starfire Guild's rumored safe house. They moved through the winding corridors, Kai's heart thudding with every footstep. Occasionally, the hatchling chirped softly or sniffed at a passing rat with visible interest. Kai chuckled nervously. "Not now," he murmured. "We have a long journey ahead." The destination was a rusted service elevator hidden behind a dumpster. Near the east wall of the bazaar, Kai punched in the coda sequence he'd acquired. From a sympathetic scrap merchant rode the elevator down to sublevel 9, where the Starfire Guild was said to maintain its headquarters. The doors opened onto a dim corridor lined with reinforced plating and surveillance cameras. Kai's breath caught. If the cameras were real, they would flag the unusual thermal signature of the dragon in his sling. He pressed himself against the wall, sliding quietly to avoid detection. The hatchling's body heated almost to semi-frigid levels, but her breath remained cool and smoky. Kai guessed her internal temperature regimes were far more complex than any standard biometric sensor could parse, ahead to sentries in Warren. Flight jackets stood guard beside a blast door etched with the emblem of a stylized winged flame. Kai exhaled slowly and tapped the intercom panel. "This is Kai Marlowe, requesting asylum." His voice sounded braver than he felt. "Name," one of the sentries demanded, voice flat. "Kai Marlowe, I've got urgent news, dragon hatchling recovery. Queen's forces are on her trail." He held perfectly still, aware that he sounded like a madman. A tense moment passed. Then, with a mechanical clunk, the door unlocked. The sentries stepped aside, their eyes flicking with a mixture of curiosity and wariness as Kai slipped inside. The chamber beyond was cavernous, lit by clusters of suspended luminescent orbs that cast soft, diffused light. Walls were lined with weapon racks, holoscreens, and storerooms stuffed with supplies. In the center, a half-dozen figures sat around. A circular table, humans, a few Zendarian hybrids, even a grizzled ex-captain of the Imperial fleet. His one mechanical eye scanning the newcomer with suspicion. Kai hunched low, careful to keep the hatchling concealed beneath his coat. When he reached the table, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and a dragon scale tattoo slashed across her forearm spoke first. "You're late," she said, voice steady, "and you smell of smog and sweat." "Kai Marlowe," he repeated. "I found her last night, under block sector Delta, beneath the second conduit." "I didn't know," his voice faltered. "I never meant to steal from the Queen." A murmur rippled around the table. The ex-captain leaned forward. "You have proof?" Kai unwrapped the hatchling and set her on the tabletop. The guild members leaned in, breath catching as the dragon's scaled head rose. She blinked once, then recognizing Sanctuary nuzzled Kai's palm in a show of trust. Silence fell. The dragon's scales shimmered in the orb light, sapphire streaks weaving through emerald green. A delicate crest of embryonic horns rose from her skull, still soft to the touch. Her wings, though too small to bear lift, were already distinct veined membranes that trailed neon luminescence when she shifted. The guild leader reached out, fingertips trembling as she brushed the dragon's snout. "By the ancestors," she whispered, "it's real. She's one of the Trueburn." Kai's chest tightened. "Trueburn, descendants of the Queen's royal clutch," the leader explained. "Not crossbreeds or bioengineered imitations. Pureblood dragon." She straightened, meeting Kai's eyes. "You risked everything to save her. You have our gratitude and our protection. But the Queen will not relent. You must be ready to flee subspace and cross the Veil Rim. Do you understand?" Kai swallowed. The gravity of his choice settled like lead in his stomach. He glanced down at the hatchling, whose opal eyes met his with unspoken confidence. "I understand." As the guild members rallied to prepare a hidden starcraft for their escape, Kai felt a fierce swell of determination. This creature, this dragon, was more than a chance at medicine credits, or a fleeting escape from poverty. She was hope, reborn in scales and flame. A bridge to a future where the old decrees no longer held sway. The evacuation vessel sat hidden in an abandoned orbital tether hangar. On sublevel 12, rusted maintenance hoppers retrofitted with pulse drives and makeshift stealth fields. Under the flickering glow of emergency illuminators, Kai, the Starfire, guild operatives, and the lost hatchling prepared for their flight. But even as engineers armed the vessel's minimal weapons and tech scramblers, a sense of dread filled the air. The Queen's wrath was coming. The sky darkened shy above Novaris. Prime, the imperial sky dissolved into a maelstrom of color. A storm of solar-charged particles, whipped into furious spirals by an immense gravitational engine, cast the heavens in shifting bands of violet and crimson. Reports crackled through the guild's calm network, airspace tremors, power surges, and the telltale harmonic signature of a draconic voice. Mighty and terrible. Kai paced the chamber. Illyra nestled in her sling. Though her scales had brightened to a molten opal, she seemed restless, her tiny claws tapping against the wiring of her harness as she emitted low trills. Every now and then, she stretched one wingtip, the membrane unfolding like translucent silk. "They're coming," whispered Jara Helm, the silver-tattooed leader of the guild. Her mechanical eye glowed pale blue as she consulted a handheld scanner. Queen Varana's flagship has dropped out of subspace above the upper atmosphere. She'll descend in less than 10 minutes. Kai's heart thundered. Memories of holo sagas flickered through his mind. Great dragons once carried entire fleets on their backs, their crystalline armor shattering starships with a single swing of their barbed tails. But Varana was a legend among legends, a dragon queen whose wingspan eclipsed moons, whose roar could shatter planetary shields. If she learned that Kai harbored her hatchling, she would raise the guild's hideout to cinders. He knelt beside the hatchling, pressing a hand to her scaled head. "Stay calm, Illyra," he murmured. "We'll be gone before they find us." A sudden tremor rattled the floor. Through the hangar's reinforced windows, they saw the Queen's flagship, a city-sized vessel armored in black-green scales that glowed with eldritch runes. It descended like a dark star into the atmosphere, raking the sky with plasma boosters. The hangar doors groaned, energy arcing along the metal seams. Jara's voice rose over the alarms. "Launch now." Engineers sprinted to the hoppers. Kai dashed to his breath shallow. He strapped in Illyra's sling chest high, ensuring she was secure. She chirped once, a crystalline note that seemed to pierce the tension. Beside him, Captain Wren of the ex-Imperial fleet yanked a console into place. "I've jammed most standard trackers, but she's got Elder Draconic sensors. We're a ghost only until she activates her biological rays." He slapped his holocard into the bay's bypass port. "Hope you're ready for a wild ride." 2. Flight through Inferno with a thunderous hum. The hangar's interior lights dimmed as the stealth shields engaged. The massive doors opened to reveal the turbulent sky, streaked with lightning and plasma jets. One by one, the hoppers sprang to life, their pulse drives protesting with a high-pitched whine. Kai felt the entire structure shake as the vessels pivoted, thrusters flaring. Illyra chirped again, wings twitching. Kai tightened his grip. "Almost there," he whispered, though he knew it wasn't enough. The Queen's flagship now loomed overhead, its underbelly blazing with ion cannons trained on the hangar. A deafening boom erupted as a particle beam struck the hangar roof. Debris rained down in sparks and shrapnel. "Go, go, go," Jara shouted. The hopper's cargo clamps released. The ship plunged into the sky. With the groan of overloaded thrusters, Kai's vessel cleared the hangar, plummeting into the storm-choked atmosphere. Lightning crackled around them, each bolt illuminating the battered hull in strabbing bursts. Inside, alarms blared. "Captain," Wren slammed switches, diverting power to shields. "She's firing plasma arcs," he yelled. Through the viewport, Kai saw the Queen's flagship trail bolts of superheated energy. One plasma arc grazed the hopper's port side, sending flares racing along the hull plating. The vessel shuddered, circuits sparked. Kai felt Illyra tense against him. Her body glowed hot with panic. He reached down, stroking her crest. "It's okay, little one," he soothed. "I've got you." The hitch in the waves of gravity tossed them as though in a cosmic tempest. Ren glimpsed a solution on the tactical display. "We can dive into the other rift," he yelled, pointing to a pale blue streak on the map, a rift in the planet's magneto-atmospheric sheath that led to uncharted slipstreams of space. The entry was narrow, and the currents unpredictable, but it might shake the Queen's arrays. "Do it," Kai called, though his stomach knotted. The pilots banked hard. The hopper's thrusters roared in defiance. Outside, luminous clouds closed around them, each bolt of lightning striking mere meters away. Static-filled winds ripped across the hull, rattling them like a tin can in a gale. "Brace for entry," Ren shouted, and they plummeted headlong into the rift. Sanctuary in the slipstream world inverted in a swirl of colors: emerald green, sapphire blue, obsidian black. Gravity buckled, then released them into a silent expanse where the stars glimmered like shards of ice. The hull warmed as the slipstream's ictonic fields washed over the faltering shields. Kai unhooked a lyra from her sling and set her on his lap. She blinked at the new vista, wings unfurling slightly as if tasting zero-G. Her eyes shone with awe and confusion. It was the first time she'd seen unfiltered starlight, untainted by smog or city rays. Behind them, the Queen's flagship materialized out of the rift, scales gleaming with eldritch power. Its sensors had tracked them through the slipstream, and now its magnetic bolts probed the hull. Ren cursed, jamming power to the thrusters to maintain separation. Jara appeared at Kai's side. Mechanical eye fixed on the tactical display. "We can't outrun her," she said, "but we can outsmart her. The rift currents here can loop us back around to emerge on the far side of the planet. If we time a secondary dive, we might mask our signature long enough to reach the Guild's backup base on Phobos Colony." A moment of hope. Kai's heart pounded. "Phobos Colony," he repeated. "The one the Empire quarantined after the biotech scandal." She nodded. "Evacuated in 19, left to rot. But the old resistances hid stockpiles, their fuel, parts, even a salvage shuttle that can punch through a blockade." Kai gathered his courage, then set a course. The pilots engaged the slipstream thrusters. Outside, the rift's currents writhed like living rivers of light, pulling them into a cosmic eddy. For a heartbeat, Kai felt weightless and tethered from fear and duty. He held Alira close, marveling at the way her scales refracted distant starlight into prismatic hues. But serenity shattered as a plasma lance struck the hopper's port engine. The cushion of ictonic fields flickered, and the hopper lurched. Ren cursed, bringing the vessel's power to bear. "Arsenal, I'll see you safe," he growled. "Sealing engineering bulkheads, you to get to Phobos. I'll draw her off." "No," Kai shouted, but Ren had already activated the manual override, diverting all power to engines at the cost of life support in the aft section. Sparks showered the cockpit as consoles darkened. "Go," Jara ordered, grabbing Kai's arm. "He's right, we can't save everyone." Kai's throat tightened. He clutched Alira, whose wings fluttered anxiously. "Thank you," he rasped to Ren as they ducked into the hopper's maintenance corridor. Ren's silhouette lingered in the viewport, framing the cockpit's view of Tiamat's black hull, Queen Varana's flagship looming like a vengeful god. As the final safety hatch sealed behind them, Kai and Jara sprinted toward the cargo bay, where the Guild's tech specialist awaited with a small corvette, an ancient salvage shuttle powered by illicit Ethereum crystals. The corvette's engines coughed to life, its stealth field shimmering around its hull. Kai threw himself into the pilot's seat as Alira cried out, a high, clear tone that struck like a bell. He looked down to find the hatchling expanded in size, her tail flicking in alarm. Her body glowed brighter, scales igniting in a brief flare of fiery orange. "Self-defense resonance," Jara said, sliding into the co-pilot's chair. "She's reacting to Varana's energy signature. If we can sync her with the rift's currents, she might cloak us biologically." Kai's hands flew over the controls. "Do it." Outside, the rift's lights pulsed in rhythms that seemed to echo Alira's scales. The corvette dove back into the ictonic swirl, HULL pitted by stray plasma bolts. Alira's roar, small but potent, reverberated through the ship, and for a moment, the rift answered in kind. Currents folded around them, shielding their heat and electromagnetic signature. The Queen's flagship expelled a final lance of plasma aimed directly at the corvette's aft thrusters, but the shot passed through the warped rift field, dissipating into cascades of diffuse energy. Kai exhaled as the corvette dropped from the rift's embrace, skimming low across Novaris, Prime's northern oceans. Below, the world spun in indifferent grandeur, lights of coastal cities glittering like terrestrial constellations. Somewhere on Phobos colony, sanctuary awaited. Kai looked at Alira, now nestled in his lap, her head resting on his forearm. She blinked, exhausted but unharmed. He stroked her crest. "We made it." Jera's voice crackled from the comlink. "Phobos surface approach in 3 minutes. Brace for manual descent. They've shut down automated beacons." Kai nodded, tightening his grip. Ahead lay perilous skies, hostile patrols, and uncertain allies. But for the first time since he found the egg in the Shale district, hope bloomed in his chest. He had defied the Queen's wrath, survived her storm, and protected the lost hatchling. Now, with the last sanctuary awaiting on a quarantined moon, Kai realized that their struggle was far from over. But their bond had only just begun. Phobos colony lay hidden in perpetual twilight, built by corporate speculators and abandoned after the biotech scandals. Its rusting spires and sand-blasted plazas had become a sanctuary for outcasts, scientists fleeing Imperial purge squads, exiled pilots, and the remnants of the Starfire Guild. Kai's salvage corvette dropped through the tenuous atmosphere with a shudder, its landing skids gouging rebound trails across the dusty regolith. Inside the cramped cockpit, Kai eased Alira from his lap and carried her onto the cracked hangar floor. The hatchling's talons clicked softly against the metal plates. Her scales still glowing with residual rift energy, she cocked her head, nostrils flaring at the tang of recycled air and ozone. Jara Helm met them at the ramp, her silver-streaked hair dusted with Phobos red grime. "She'll be safe here," Jara promised, sweeping the hatchling into a reinforced containment cradle lined with Ethereum insulation. "Our medtech teams have rigged a makeshift incubator. She can recover and grow until she's strong enough to move." Kai knelt beside the cradle, brushing a hand along Alira's crest. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything." Jara nodded. "We'll guard her with our lives, but your part isn't over. Queen Varana will hunt us across the system. We need to strike back." 2. The Council of Wings at evening. Kai stood before a council convened in the Great Hall of Phobos' central dome, a vaulted chamber repurposed from old mining archives. Projected holomaps and strategic overlays glimmered across the dome's ceiling, tracking Imperial dreadnoughts, patrol vectors, and rift stream corridors. As Kai entered, the murmurs hushed. At the head of the table sat the ex-captain, Ren Valdros, his mechanical eye scanning Kai with solemn intensity. Beside him, a gaunt Zendarian tactician tapped on a holo keyboard. Across the table, Jara and a small contingent of Starfire elders waited. In the center lay a single object, the fractured shell of the other dragon eggs, pieced together like relic shards. Ren cleared his throat. "We've confirmed it. The sabotage wasn't random. The shattered eggs bear genetic markers of House Orinth Varana's power-hungry cousin. Orinth sought to discredit and weaken the Queen, hoping his coup would install him as regent of Dragonkind." A ripple of shock passed through the council. Kai's stomach clenched. He had assumed Imperial purges were the ultimate threat, but the rot had begun within dragon politics themselves. Jara nodded. "If we can present this evidence to Varana in person, deliver the truth of Erin's treachery, there's a chance she'll spare us and retire Orinth forever. But we'll need a diplomatic envoy, someone she can trust." All eyes turned to Kai. He swallowed. "Me?" Ren's mechanical eye softened. "You saved her life, human. You're her link to our world and to the Queen's. She'll listen to you." 3. A voyage through Starlithe. Next dawn, Kai boarded the Guild's stealth frigate, the Eclipse's Grace, and took his place in the envoy's chamber, a circular observation deck with wraparound windows. Into the void, Alira, now grown to the size of a span, her wings still too small for flight, but powerful enough to generate a low-level thermal drafts, perched on a cushioned dais at the center. Kai's heart hammered as the frigate slipped the planetary gravity. well and accelerated into subspace. The voyage inched along the rift stream, each jump carrying them closer to the storms that swirled around Varana's domain. Through reinforced viewports, Kai watched the Dragon Queen's stronghold come into view, a floating archipelago of obsidian towers and molten rivers, suspended above a scorched planet ringed by a shattered moon dot in the silence before arrival. Kai knelt beside Alira, brushing absent-minded fingers through her teeny crest horns. "You're ready," he murmured, "just like I told you." Alira chirped and nuzzled his palm, her golden-flecked eyes bright with confidence. For confrontation in the Ember Spirethi frigate dropped out of slipspace, into a cavernous docking bay carved into volcanic rock. As magnetic clamps latched onto the hull, Kai's envoy party disembarked. Kai, Ren, Jara, and the Zendarian tactician, Lyria Voss. Torches of molten gas lined the corridor, flickering against drakes carved in basalt. The air vibrated with latent magic. They reached the grand hall of embers, an amphitheater of blackened columns and a flora of pulsating magma. At its center stood Varana herself, colossal even in repose. Her crystalline scales refracted the molten light into a halo, her eyes twin infernos that appraised the intruders with regal detachment. A horde of lesser dragons circled above, their wings whispering like a storm about to break. Kai stumbled forward, Alira cradled against his chest. His voice echoed. "Your Majesty," he began, voice trembling yet determined, "I bring proof that House Orinth orchestrated the sabotage of your clutch, killing your unborn heirs to seize power." The Queen's gaze narrowed. Flames stuttered along her throat ridges. "A human accuses a dragonborn." Her voice rang like a temple bell. "Show me." At Kai's nod, Lyria activated a holopad, projecting forensic scans of the eggshells. Genetic splicers traced signatures unique to Erin's brood patterns, impossible for any outside dragonkind to mimic. The chamber grew still, heat surging. As Varana's aura flared, Ren stepped forward. "We intercepted House Erin's calm transmissions. We have logs, coded messages explicitly ordering the purge of your eggs and the framing of your loyalists." The Queen's titanic head inclined. She studied the projections for a long moment, then looked directly at Kai. "You human have risked your life for mine. Wronged me, yet saved me." Kai swallowed. "I did what was right, Your Majesty, for Alira, for dragons and humans alike." Alira chirped, stepping forward to brush her snout against Kai's hand as though to affirm his words. Varana's gaze shifted to the hatchling, now grown into a small, adolescent form, silvery wings arsing in the heat. The Queen exhaled a plume of violet flame that danced across the magma floor without scorching it. "I owe you reparations," she rumbled. "House Orinth will be judged for treason. You have my pardon and my gratitude, V." A new pact of scales and fleshes dawn broke over the volcanic horizon. Outside the Ember Spire's fissure windows, Kai stood with Varana on a terrace of obsidian pillars. The Queen's flagship glowed behind her like a dark sun. Between them, Alira stretched her wings in the thinning air, testing the currents. Varana's voice was softer, almost maternal. "Your bravery and compassion have rekindled the old bonds between our peoples. Let this hatchling symbolize our renewed pact, dragon and human, wing in hand, guardian and ward." Kai bowed. "I swear my life to that pact," with a rippling flex of her colossal wings. The Queen brushed aside the air between them. "Then rise, Kai Marlowe, ambassador of the scales. Your name shall be spoken whenever a child finds wonder in the sky." Alira gave a high, joyful trill in response, her first true song. Kai reached out to stroke her crest, tears shining in his eyes at the enormity of the moment. Around them, the Ember Spire resonated with ancient runes activated by the Queen's will, weaving a bond that would endure so long as dragons drew breath. Vi. Horizons Annuiques later, the eclipse's grace, and the Queen's flotilla escorted Alira back to Novaris Prime, not as an outlawed contraband but as a royal envoy on her first diplomatic journey. Crowds gathered in the neon-lit piazzas to witness the hatchling's official recognition, her scales burning with royal firebrand as she soared in a ceremonial flight. Around the Thunder Spire, Kai stood on a skybridge above the crowd, Jara at his side. Below them, humans and dragons alike looked upward with awe. united by a creature born of courage and hope for Kai. The boundaries between worlds had dissolved. He saw in every pair of human eyes a reflection of his own wonder, and in every draconic roar a promise of peace. When the ceremony ended, Kai climbed onto the skybridge's rail, Illyra landing gracefully beside him. He reached to scratch behind her ear, her scales humming with contentment. "We did it," he murmured. "We really did it." Illyra's wings fluttered in agreement, ready for the adventures yet to come. And as the twin sons of Novaris Prime dipped below the horizon, Kai realized that their story was only beginning. Together, human and dragon would chart new constellations of cooperation, exploration, and unbreakable friendship across the boundless tapestry of the stars.